So if you actually move over to the next slide, I'll just give a quick introduction. My name is Konkana Count. I work as Director of Consulting with our Smart Buildings, Energy and Environment practice at Frost Sullivan. This is a global responsibility I undertake, and I have been a very active member of this industry for many, many years now. Spent about 14 years with Frost Sullivan, and prior to that, I spent about 7 years with CBRE. And I'm certainly very delighted to be part of this project. We take this project with the understanding that it comes with tremendous responsibility, given the times we are in. And we are fully aware that the way this project is going to be conducted and the outcomes are going to be, in many ways, providing some very discrete guidance for this industry. So we are very happy to take on this project, but at the same time, we're fully aware of the responsibility that is entrusted to us. We at Frost & Sullivan have been very, very proactively involved in this space with various industry participants, from corporations to governments, to not-for-profit organizations, to regulatory bodies, guiding them through various scenario projection exercises, for instance, providing our own outlook and feedback for the industry in terms of guidance as to how reset rebound measures need to pan out and what needs to be done in terms of a response strategy framework for the industry. So it's very, very critical that we bring in a lot of that already developed thought process to further strengthen and support this project as we conduct it for this particular industry. And we are very, very entrenched within the smart building sector, within the industry organizations, as well as also related sectors like energy, smart cities, etc. So we cover everything from hard physical technologies to not only how you commercialize those products and solutions, but also conduct it through changing business models, and also providing a lot of future directions for the industry to innovate and keep up to date with everything that's happening around us. So with that, if we move over to the next slide. So this is just a very quick snapshot of the global economic forecast that we have put out. And this has undergone several iterations since we first produced it in early February of this year. And this has been provided as a guidance tool for various organizations, including industry bodies. Our own projections pretty much tells us that, for the rest of 2020, we are not going to see any of our growth curves really, move upwards for all industries collectively, as well as particularly the energy and buildings industry to rebound. We are looking at positive growth rates only towards the fourth quarter of 2021. So we are reeling under very negative circumstances here. This is totally unprecedented. It's unlike any other recessionary tendencies that we have seen slow down our industry. So the whole reset rebound phase is going to be very unique, as well as it is going to be marred with a lot of uncertainties. So overall, this is a complete V curve that we are projecting for the industry, with rebound only expected towards the last quarter of 2021. So if you go to the next slide, just quickly to touch upon the impact that we have noticed. Now, obviously, various industries are impacted in various different ways, but then overall, there are a number of industries that will continue to reel under net negative impact. So if you take tourism, if you take aerospace, for instance, transportation, mobility, even manufacturing and financial services to some degree. These are industries that are going to be constantly impacted for a very long time. The overall impact of this downtrend that we are going to see on these industries is going to manifest itself over very prolonged impacts that we are going to see generate out of this. On the other hand, if you look at things that are more positively impacted overall. So if you take personal care, for instance, materials, chemicals industry, healthcare, including building services, because at some point you have to open up these buildings. At some point, as we are already seeing now, we are looking at, organized, conservative re-entry planning for most of our buildings. So overall impact on building services, as dictated by COVID requirements, is going to be very tremendous. So there are going to be industries that will have a certain positive degree of impact, as opposed to others that are going to see much more long-term, prolonged negative impact. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to touch upon the transformations that we're going to see in some of the related sectors, because buildings obviously don't operate on their own. We are constantly impacted by what's happening in cross-section of other industries like energy, like renewables, overall fuel supply situation, and of course, the broader context of buildings and the city. So we look at this space in a rather holistic fashion. We are going to talk more about the impact of buildings in the next couple of slides. But if you look at energy as a whole, I think the conversation is definitely going to be directed more around reliability, around grid security. Definitely there's going to be more demand for lower emission technologies to support distributed generation. So these are going to be some of the aftermath impacts that are going to be witnessed by the utility sector, the energy distribution and transmission sector, for instance. We are also going to see definitely more demand for transparency as far as, pricing is concerned, giving more bargaining power to consumers, for instance. On the renewable side, overall, as we know, I mean, the investment cycles being so long-term, this is probably one sector that is not necessarily going to be hard impacted. Overall, the growth is going to remain immune, but what is obviously happening right now in the immediate medium term is that the capacity building aspects are impacted. So if you look at solar PV production decline in China, for instance, that is definitely a big contributing factor here. But what we will definitely see is that as our built environment prepares for post-COVID requirements, one thing that is very clear is that there could be demand increases for packaged installation. Whether we or not we are going to operate our buildings in full capacity immediately over the next few years is still very questionable. How the new construction industry is going to behave and what will be, what will be the impact on newer built environment is also going to dictate how renewables will be integrated in these new built environments. So the demand increase for packaged installation could be in the incline. So this is something that we are predicting for the renewables industry. On the fuel supply side, definitely there's significant amount of discussion to move things into OPEX-based models as opposed to CAPEX-based model, because there is tremendous amount of scrutiny right now that we are seeing for efficient capital deployment, for better risk management. So these trends are going to likely to continue on the fuel supply side. But overall, if you take it in the constant context of the urban environment, the city itself, I think this interaction that we have predicted for many years now, the interaction of the built environment with how the city manages itself, the smart city concept, I think that is definitely going to increase as a result of some of the post-COVID response strategies that we're going to see emerge. So on the response side, right now, what we are seeing is that obviously we are leveraging as much as we can some of the immediately available technologies like facial recognition technology, for instance, detection of temperature, environmental control. So those are definitely to some degree already leveraged. Proactively speaking, going forward, there would be more emphasis on segregation of risk and vulnerability zones, for instance, perhaps a better uptake of wearable technology to aid some of these strategies. But when you move into the more reset rebound phases, obviously we are going to see more automated involvement of some of the technologies like thermal sensors, for instance, or containment monitoring, for instance, in order to create an infrastructure and environment that is pandemic ready. And rebound strategies, from what we are going to see, is that there is going to be significant enhancement of digital transformation, whether it is going to be the city itself, the city administrative functions, or the suppliers, vendors, and infrastructure solution providers will have to transform their businesses digitally, both internal businesses as well as external businesses, as they cater solutions into this marketplace, which is going to dictate how some of that response mechanism and the response strategies are going to look like in the future. So if we go to the next slide, we will talk a little bit about the buildings themselves and what is going to be dictated by the new normal, as we are calling it. So as our industries are dealing with this whole imminent slowdown and the fundamental shift that is being brought about by COVID-19, there are obviously distinct challenges for the building industry and the ecosystem of the solution providers that cater to this industry. And we know this is only going to magnify in the future. So when we talk about dealing with COVID-19 challenges, mitigation measures to deal with these challenges for our buildings, there are essentially three things that we're talking about here. So these measures will have to be capable of handling the airborne viral load. They have to be capable of handling the surface-borne viral load, and finally, the behavioral viral loads. And that encompasses a gamut of things. Firstly, we have to look at repurposing buildings themselves. We have to reverse the concept of open office. That presents already tremendous design challenges for our owners and occupants. And now you add to that the calibration, the recalibration of systems, the controls, the sensors, in order to fit the new occupancy patterns that is going to be dictated. So these are obviously very tremendous amount of challenges that we are already dealing with today. The critical measures, of course, concerns health and sanitization, cleaning, for instance, addressing indoor environmental quality challenges, trying to go touch-free, contact-free when it comes to vertical transport systems or access control for our buildings. Now, these are only the immediate areas that we're talking about. From here on, we will likely see more integration of biosensors, of pathogen detection technologies, integration of some of these technologies with mobile devices, for instance, including, of course, mandatory antimicrobial finishes for buildings, for instance. So these could be some of the more stringent measures coming our way very soon. However, when we talk about all of this, we know that these come to us with tremendous hindrances in terms of working capital shortage, in terms of wage liabilities. If you look at asset management companies and facility management companies, for instance, they're having a hard time trying to be response ready today. And whether or not the paucity of budgets will actually allow for such technology changes that our buildings will warrant for dealing with post-COVID-19 is really the big question here. So with that, if we go into the next slide, what I also wanted to talk about is some of the predictions. These are, of course, coming out of some of the proactive work that we ourselves are doing in this industry. One of the concerns that we are seeing is that what people definitely want to know is energy going to take a backseat in all of this? Because we know that for many years, energy efficiency, better energy management, these have been critical drivers for our industry. So what is going to happen to energy now that we have started to move the rhetoric more towards health and sanitization? Well, we think building managers will look for energy management solutions that go beyond occupant comfort and sustainability. They need to synchronize with emergency response systems. So the ability to recalibrate environmental quality is going to be a critical function demanded from the EMS going forward in order to address some of those pandemic-ready needs. And we are also going to witness connected safety and security preparedness plugging into EMS. And this is something that we are tracking very intensively within the startup space right now. But I think what's going to be really critical is, when we look at our buildings, they provide a certain functionality and usage today, whether it's a retail building or a commercial office building. But what is going to be really critical is pandemic-ready use cases of these buildings. So how do you put a building immediately into an alternate use going forward? So exploring some of these pandemic-ready